Welcome to Roads Less Traveled, the podcast where real estate, rail trails, and bike tourism meet. I'm Craig Della Penna. I'm a realtor with a passion for turning former railroad corridors to thriving trails and communities. If you're curious about buying homes near these trails, starting a bed and breakfast, or simply want to learn about the incredible opportunities along these greenways, you're in the right place. Every 2 weeks, I'll share stories, expert advice, and conversations with guests who know the ins and outs of rail-to-trail living and tourism. Ready to explore a unique slice of real estate and adventure? Let's hit the trail. Bill O'Neill, retired engineer based in Connecticut, a principal at Fussin O'Neill, one of the region's largest, most respected engineering and consulting firms. And I would consider him to be the father of the East Coast Greenway. And I've got a number of questions here I want to chat with you about, and we're going to have fun. I like your little tag on the side that says Billo. I like that.
Lifebuoy called that body odor. If you remember way back to Lifebuoy.
Yep. Oh my God. Here we go. When you sent me that list of, notable life events, and I discovered that all your kids followed in your route. I knew your son Steve made greenways and trails part of his civil environmental engineering thesis and his professional career at VHB, but I didn't realize so many of your children were also involved. Can you walk us through how each family member contributed towards the trails and
Sure.
greenways or the engineering world?
Yeah, sure. We are a family of 17 people, and Carol and I are all about family. And over the last 60 years, each of our family, or most of them, have touched the Greenway magic. And so that dates back not only to Steve having his master's thesis in multi-use trails, and then working for VHB, helping create the, I believe it was South Carolina statewide plan and Massachusetts statewide plan when he was with the company. However, family relates to my big aha moment. Sitting in my office, Fussin O'Neill, in comes a woman who puts out her hand and says, "My name is Ann Lusk, and we want your family and others to get on this trail." And so what is this trail? She reminded me that Karen Votava, a New York planner, had worked in the world of trails. And she chaired a group that said, we ought to do something on the East Coast. And so Ann says, it's time to have an inaugural ride. Put your family together as part of a group that will go up to Boston and go down to Washington, D.C. to meet the Department of Transportation secretary. So let it begin. Daughter Kathleen says, I'll ride. Steve says, I'll ride. Susie and Carol said, we'll SAG ride. And Dan says, we'll continue to give pro bono services from Fussin O'Neill to tell the story. So the aha was simple. The details, like always, followed. And we got a few things to think about. We don't have a SAG wagon. I'll go to East Catholic High School and borrow theirs. Oh, we don't have any meals, Ann. I'll go to Friendly's and we'll get a lot of tickets so we can get free meals on the way. And then Ann says, I was a spot of light under President Bush, and I've got contacts in Washington, D.C. We really ought to reach out to some of the disadvantaged riders, or at least people, bring them up to Boston and we'll give it a go. And they don't have any bicycles. I'll go to the local bicycle people. I forget the name of the bike, and we'll get free bikes. And we did, or she did. Okay, off we go, Boston. And family is touching this the whole way. So with Carol, and Steve says, what do we use for mapping? He's an engineer. I said, all we got is the USGS topographical maps. Yeah. He says, I'll bring a machete and for the tough pieces. Okay, so off they go. and they stay within a couple hundred yards of our cottage on Columbia Lake. So there goes Carol. We're going to have a major sleepover, all these people. We'll have turkey, we'll make donuts, and we will welcome them. So then they pass through because they had to stop and see the governor. They'd already seen the governor in Rhode Island. So then they go and they continue to head south. And at the receiving end, we had done a little talk down there. The then Secretary of Transportation said, come on over, we'll go to the microphone and do a gopher. And so you won't be able to see this, but this card shows Steve at the microphone with the Department of Transportation Secretary, and then Congressman somebody. And that was the inaugural ride. So then family says, interrupt anytime, you know that my problem.
I'm following you along. It's interesting so far and illuminating things. It's piecing together your story for me.
So the group got together, particularly with Ann's leadership. Karen Vitava rode some and Pat King rode some. But so game over. She says, we got to do something to, oh, by the way, so we got to have some memorable. Let's go. That's a different one.
North American Greenway Tour.
So we want to have an international ride. And the closest nation is Canada. And so we got to do something like that. So
East Coast Greenway, yes.
Yeah. So now she says, all right, we'll start at your house in Manchester, Connecticut. She'll contact several Canadians to come down for a sleepover and a nice breakfast, and we'll head to Canada. And we'll what do you call it when you move in and somebody and you munch off them? But anyhow, we're on our way to Canada. And so we go step by step and lessons learned all the way. The one that I think relates is that as we met groups in the US, the makeup was typical: athletes, advocates, health people. But we got to Canada and we met with their people, and they were tourist people. In fact, specifically, he says, as I'm greeting you, I'm welcoming you to Canada. I'm also looking at your bike, your clothing, and I'm estimating how much money you're going to leave here. So we'll have a return on investment up here in Canada and have that be the focus of a promotion. So that was the trip to Canada. And in the process, Jean-Francois Pronovost, I bumped into him and he said, hey, we got to promote the international idea. I said, well, let me see if we can get on the agenda for the annual meeting between Canadian Eastern, not governors.
Premiers.
Yeah, premiers and the governors will go on the agenda and do a dog and pony show. And we do. And so we do that. And then they come to Connecticut. We go to another meeting and bang our gums a little bit. So that was the relationship with him. And as I mentioned, Craig, he just published a book. I went to buy it, but it's in French. So I don't know what I'll do with that.
I met him years ago when I was called to go to be the speaker at a conference in Montreal. And that's where I met him. And he was laying out the the Cross Canadian Trail there. He was an interesting character for sure. Yeah. Still around.
And then he invited us, I represented East Coast Greenway, to go up to Burlington, join a group, and we would go across the Frontenac, and that's where the premiers were meeting. And so disappointed in that I don't think the East Coast Greenway, I think that's a sleeping giant to make that formal connection. We did it earlier when we got up to Maine. Daughter Kathleen, we were on a tandem, and we were invited to come into Canada with some reps, and we went to St. John and talked it up a little bit. We've done 1,000 times.
Yeah.
But so that was pretty much the tour discussion. You did touch, if you want to go to the license plate, the Greenway license.
Oh, wait a minute. I want to talk about the return on investment.
Absolutely.
We're on the third section here, ROI in the future. Connecticut has one of the strongest trail census programs in the United States. What did that data reveal that surprised you the most?
The push came from Bruce Donald as the New England rep, and as a data person, I also joined him, and so we got funding. Isaac Diaz are good, but you got to get funding. DEP put some coins together, go to Yukon, and let the counts begin. Daughter Kathleen, she was on the counter down in Charter Oak Park, doing interviews and counts, and so from there it grew, and now we have a find a trail item. And we have, as you faced always, some interesting things when we go to DOT. Hey, on the interstate, let's have a sign to parking for the trail. Oh, we can't do that. Wait a minute, you tell me how to get wine, how to go to church, but you can't tell me how to park. Anyhow, that's an effort in flight. And so that's special.
What do you think that these ROI studies, I commissioned that study a couple of years ago about the Mass Central, the long east-west trail across Massachusetts, on the financial impact of trails. And looking at Connecticut, and we just took out the chalk blocks on the report about the north-south trail from New Haven to Northampton, the New Haven and Northampton Canal Greenway, the new name. Used to have 16 different names. Now it's distilling down to smaller and smaller group of names, but the umbrella name for the long trail. Why do you think it's taken so long for this to get happening here?
It's always an interesting, and you've been there, naming a trail. That's always a debate. Everybody has their own idea. So when I had an idea of a trail from Hartford to Providence, I said, I don't want to go through that. So I'll just name it. I called it the Charter Oak Greenway. And everybody, where'd that name come from? I don't know. It's been around. Okay. So why did it take so long? Because it's the interesting part, the southern part with my friends down there, and the north with Bruce. They couldn't agree on the name. But okay, so this takes long. So we're all right. Let me listen to a question rather than babble.
Okay. After decades of work, are you satisfied with the pace of trail development, or do you wish that progress had been faster? That's a good question.
Yeah, absolutely. However, we've reached the tipping point, and we've been beat up the whole way with the NIMBYs, false information, and even in Manchester's case, a backdoor illegal issue. Briefly, okay, work hard. DOT says to Manchester, you got $500,000. You're going to go build the Cheney Rail Trail. And, okay, that's good. So we just have to go to the board. And so up comes an objector and said, wait a minute, that's too much to pay. And this is a difficult time nationally, and $500,000 is too much to pay. And I said, look, $500,000 will be spent either in Manchester or somewhere else. So he does his politics, goes to the board, and gets them to deny the grant.
Oh, wow.
But the exciting part is, and then he went out and bought it personally.
Wow.
And with it, because in his back pocket, he knew that trail had utility. There was no easement for the utility. So he was prepared to go to the utility, and he did. He got $250,000 for the easement, and he prevented the trail to happen.
What year was that?
Yeah, I got the thing in front of me somewhere. It was right after that. We asked you to come down and enter the lion's den.
Okay, yeah.
And whatever year that was, we circled the wagon, and you came, and you got an earful of we got to protect the national debt and all of that stuff.
Yes, the high altitude arguments.
Yeah. However, it's done. And now we have one last gap in the Tri-Town 17-mile loop, which will be built next year. But return on investment, that's where it's got to be, because so often it's price is the excuse, the no-go excuse.
Right. It seems that is the argument when we're in Massachusetts. The long trail, we're right now around 65 miles open. By the end of the year, we're going to be about 75 of the 104 miles on that east-west trail. But those are all the low-hanging fruit projects, all the easy to build things. The ones that are left are going to be very difficult and expensive. Just on that corridor, there's 3 bridges over 600 feet long that need to be replaced, that were scrapped out stupidly in the 60s. There's a 1,000-foot tunnel needing to be renovated. And so there's big projects, probably several more miles of corridor to be reassembled. But Mass DOT is now costing up how much it's going to cost to finish. And here we are recording this in mid-September, and they're nearly ready to come out with the costing report. And we know that when the trail gets built, the east-west 100-mile trail, it's going to be worth about $200 million per year, every year, once it gets built. But it's going to be very expensive. And I know that there's going to be some hand-wringing by DOT. And that's why we took out the chalk blocks on the north-south trail connecting New Haven to Northampton. That east-west trail has 18 intersecting trails. The westernmost trail is the one from New Haven to Northampton. That trail is one of the 18, but it's the most impactful because it's the easiest way for people from New York City or the suburbs outside of New York City to get to New Haven and then come up to Northampton, turn left, turn right, actually, to head towards Boston. And we know that impact from those users coming up from Connecticut and New York is going to tip the scales. That the report we have about the East-West Trail was only largely about the population density in Eastern Mass coming to experience the trail on a multi-day journey. Adding in this north-south segment from Connecticut, I think, is going to tip the scales so that DOT will be compelled to complete this trail. And so it's going to be an important thing. We think that the report about the north-south trail will be out in another several weeks here. And this is going to be
As you know,
impactful.
as people purposefully, honestly, and sometimes less, they've got to see the numbers. Fortunately, Yukon now has legitimate, counted, and interviewed numbers. And Canada has the estimated dollar per rider amount. Multiply them together, and you're getting where you are with numbers. And the other critical thing is safety. We've seen our bicycle ped fatalities, injuries skyrocket. So we have an obligation to give that. And finally, Connecticut finally got there. Over the years, they would dribble us a few coins, us being DEEP, the Greenway Advisory Council that I used to chair, now a member. And fortunately, this year, the legislation said we will give that group $10 million this year, $10 million next year to touch the Greenway gaps to make this a better place.
That's what's about to happen here, except I think the Massachusetts gaps on the Mass Central Rail Trail, they're going to be very expensive. And so they're counting on our trail report about the North-South Trail as something to help them sell the idea. Matter of fact, actually later this afternoon, I'm having dinner with a state senator in central Massachusetts who's going to be an impactful guy on getting the money needed here. They need the report from Mass DOT to see how much it's going to cost to finish the trail. And then they're going to take that number and they're going to divide it into a 3 or a 5 or 7 year program to do bite-sized chunks every couple of years to get it done. And it's going to be very impactful, not for the places that are let's call them the higher end suburbs, places that are well off and the trail's already built. Getting this trail built will be for the places that are less well off. And for places in central Massachusetts that like flyover country, places that are forgotten, getting the trail built out will be like an energizer to bring life back into places. The concept have you ever heard of the concept of wallets on wheels? There's actually been about 15 newspaper stories around the United States about that concept of bicycle tourists coming without their cars, just coming with bikes and wanting to overnight, not merely tenting campgrounds, but something better like a bed and breakfast. And that is what causes a renaissance in places, to have low impact tourism, people coming to spend money wallets on wheels, to spend money in communities that can use the help. And so these pathways will restore life in communities. Where I'm sitting here in the Florence village of Northampton, this is within 150 miles where I'm sitting, taking in all of Connecticut, obviously, is the densest network of dead steam railroad corridor in North America. None of this went to obscure extraction industries like lumbering operations or coal mine branch lines. It went to where the big mills were, like the Cheney Mill complex in Manchester, big multi-story, usually brick. Those aren't producing heavy things anymore, needing rail service. They're now condos, apartments, startup businesses. And that's where the wealth was created in southern New England, those small mill towns. And this network of dead railroads being converted to linear parks is going to change everything here. It's going to be more like the Netherlands than the Netherlands is. And it's really not stoppable.
And you brought us to the tipping point. And many of us are hopeful that with your leadership, you will work with Dennis at East Coast Greenway and call people together where the three trails meet each other, representing the three states.
Oh, yeah.
Out at the Sonnet and the East Coast Green and the Blackstone.
That's right, where Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts, the three corners right there.
And it's all happening. And 25 years ago, I asked David Burwell if he'd come out and drive a stake in the ground between Rhode Island and Connecticut. And he did. And Connecticut, we just finished our link, and now we're nudging Rhode Island to get us down to close the Trestle Trail. But that's David Burwell. And so what we had to do, we went to the National Guard because they were building things. They opened up 40 miles of trail for us, National Guard, but blah, blah, blah. So the big thing is, for publicity purposes, let's have a tri-trail moment. And it's all about getting into the ear of the legislator, as you're going to meet with one. And we just got in enough to get 10 million this year, 10 million next year. So it's a journey, and you've got a lot of bruises, but it doesn't matter.
It's funny you mentioned David Burwell, who is the founder, one of the two founders of the Rails to Trails Conservancy, him and Peter Hardnick. Less than a month now, in mid-October, Peter Hardnick is releasing a documentary about the history of the Rails to Trails movement. And Bill, have you ever heard of the concept of the three stages of truth? The first stage, people scoff at that newfangled idea. No matter what the idea is, they'll always, that's never going to happen. That's a joke.
Negative.
But then the second stage is people become serious. They realize that you're serious, and then they become extreme opponents, dead enders, let's say, fighting all the way. But then the third stage of truth is where we're entering now. In my real estate practice every day, people ask, what did you do before you became a realtor? I was an advocate for converting dead railroads into linear parks. And there was a lot of opposition, and people would say, people were opposed to that? And that is the third stage of truth. The people were opposed to that. They can't believe it. And so it's...
And you've seen it as we have. On the Gold Coast, in Avon, Simsbury, we put a trail through, and bingo, up came the known. Had to put an 8-foot stock and fence. Oh, my
Oh,
God.
yes.
And then
Yes, I remember that.
And then they put gates in it. So
Right.
somehow, and now they asked to have it down. So
There was a woman in, I think it was Simsbury,
oh yeah.
when she bought her house, she realigned the house, not physically, but she put where there was walls, where there was a blank wall facing the dead railroad, she put windows in that. And then she put solid walls facing the street. And she was so upset that the trail was coming, so the quietness was a little bit changed now. And she was a leader of the opposition. I remember that.
For 5 years.
Yes. But David Burwell and Peter Hardnick, their documentary, what's coming out this on PBS channels this fall, is largely showing how things changed. There was opposition, and there's film. I've seen the trailer on this movie, but it's gonna touch on that idea that people were opposed to this. And that's one of the reasons I'm standing up this podcast. I'm going to be doing this for several hundred interviews with people like you that have been around long enough to know the previous take on this was always edgy and people were opposed. And we can't let that go. There's, in
And
fact,
yeah,
David Burwell and I we used to do dog and pony shows here in the Northeast, going to people's houses and talking up the idea, and they would become friends of the trails or funders. And there was a guy who just passed away a few weeks ago that was very influential in getting the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail built. Actually, two guys that just passed away within a day of each other in eastern Massachusetts, Bob Armstrong and then Dick Williamson. They were both very instrumental in getting the trail built out there through the higher end suburban communities. And so it's very important for this conversation to be memorialized here of how hard it was. Talk a little bit about the Merritt Parkway. That I remember you telling me years ago that was like a 300-foot swath of land to create that road from the 1920s and 30s. But they put the road on the northernmost segment, but there was like a back of the envelope plan to put a bikeway on the southernmost 150 feet of that right of way.
about 10 years ago, I was privileged to meet with the landscape architect who was then working for the Bureau of Highways. And he presented more than on the back of the envelope. He presented an idea. Let's have a multi-use trail. Of course, back there, equestrian was more or less the driver. And with that, we went through a string over the 70 years of feasibility studies. And these studies done by the Regional Plan Agency, done by DOT, and they buried theirs. Clearly feasible, clearly desirable, except for the politics. So down there, we have the NIMBY. And just to illustrate it, as we on the distributing the money for DEP, sitting on that committee, they had an application, they stamp it. They need some money to build this 1 mile that's already got a preliminary design. So, hey, a great idea. We sent them a check. They sent the check back. Politically, they got the Merritt Parkway Conservancy politicized, and they sent the check back. And I'm hoping that Dennis, when he publishes his new Providence to New Haven to Providence book coming out soon, that he will reach out and show that corridor from New Haven to New York as proposed. So they're still considering that a joke. But I shared the podium with Senator Blumenthal several years ago on a dedication. And he ended, well, let me know how I can help. And then Congressman Larson for 30 years, trails. So anyhow, I can't let that go yet. I want to and will say to East Coast Greenway, please, in the new edition, release that New York energy of tourism.
Yes.
And it's purely political. And also our purple-haired Congresswoman, I forget her name, is an advocate.
Rosa?
Yep. She came to the ribbon cutting in New Haven, blah, blah, blah. So we got to get that 30 miles that are sitting there. Then we get you can't do that because there's so much difficult topography and rock. Hey, wait a minute. East Coast Greenway, you just came through Manhattan. We have a battle there, and it's time. We get some new money. So I'm trying to get East Coast Greenway in the new publication and say, and in the future, look at that 30 miles of available right away.
And since you were mentioning New York a little bit here about how they're advancing on us here. It was back in 2014, the group called Parks Trails New York, who's like a mini Rails to Trails conservancy operating in New York. They commissioned a report about the Erie Canal Trail, which at that time was only 3/4 built. And the report came out, was largely advanced by a staffer, Fran Gotchick, who was a friend of mine out of Rochester area in New York. And the report showed that even though it was 3/4 built, it was still producing $253 million a year to the state of New York and the communities along the way. And when that report was given to the governor at the time, he was so stunned that he ordered DOT to build another 400 miles of shared use paths. And they finished on time, under budget.
Yeah.
It's called the Empire State Trail today, which is effectively from Manhattan to Canada, and then going north, turn left at Albany and head all the way to Buffalo. It's like a sideways T. And so this is it's going to be very impactful. That the consultant, Fran Gotchick, who was the instrument in getting this thing done, she's retired now, but she was involved with the creation of our report about the Mass Central Trail. She took our request for proposals and tweaked it. And when we cast it out there, we had 4 respondees to do the report about the East-West Trail in Massachusetts. And we chose one who I knew was like the trump card. I don't say that in a negative way. I'll say it in a positive way here. That
It's not a political statement, is it?
No, that's right. It's the winning hand. They had a sub-consultant on who is a guy who seemed like a god inside DOTs. He'll take a look at your big capital expenditure, whatever that's going to cost. And he'll take that and look and see if it's going to be a winner or a loser. Or said with an Eastern Mass accent, is it going to be a winner or a loser? Is it going to be worth the expenditure of public money? So the guy who was the sub-consultant on the project was a guy by the name of Dan Hodge. And he shows unequivocally that if your project is going to be a winner or a loser. And when I saw that, I knew that we found the right firm. And he's the one actually doing the report now on the North-South Trail from New Haven to Northampton. And they're probably 75% done right now. And it's going to be like a second stage or a booster rocket for Mass DOT to have warmth and comfort about committing to move forward with such a big, impactful project. Because that first report we did was only about the East-West Trail's connection to Boston. And this secondary report ties in the bigger money, actually, from New York and New York suburbs coming through Connecticut up to Northampton and heading to Boston. It's going to put it over the top in terms of dollars. I'm pretty well convinced of that. But we're still a few weeks away from the completion of the report. But
And I hope he refers to the feasibility studies done on the Merritt Parkway. They're published. One of them has been swept away, but I'm trying to find it. Anyhow, it's a 70-year-old political battle, and it doesn't need to be fought because it's obvious.
Yep. That is going to be a part of the report. You will, as you mentioned, it's not just going to be about the North-South Trail. We're going to have a snapshot in time. Here we are, 2025, as to what this is going to be worth. Snapshot. And then we're going to be tying in to the population metrics and probable desirable connection directly to New York City if that Merritt Parkway Trail got built out, and adding that in to the overall metrics of what that would bring to the table here. And so our report won't be about how to get the trail politically built. It'll be showing a snapshot in time of what the metrics would be. And we're going to be able to prove that they're correct, because as we go through time, we'll know how correct the assumptions were. And so this
Right. Could I talk to him? Can you give me contact information for the consultant? And I can give him specific study comments.
Yes. I'll introduce you to him today, him and his team.
Oh. How do you do that?
I'll email you later on today.
Oh, okay, good. And I
Yep.
will quote chapter and verse from the 70-year history.
Tell me about the Connecticut license plate, the Greenway license plate program.
Greenway, it is okay. So and I had an idea that because many states have specialized plates. So as chairman of the DEP advisory committee, I went and I got a chance to meet with the governor. And at that time, Governor Rowland. And I said, hey, what about? He said, go for it. Go to the legislature and get it done. So with that, I had some senator friend and we put this thing together. It simply said, legislatively, there shall be in the Department of Vehicles an opportunity for $30 to get a Greenways plate. And the proceeds from that, administrative bucks, a few bucks to the motor vehicle, and the rest goes to DEEP for Greenways projects. And so after a long thing, it finally becomes a legislative issue. Right? And the governor says, come into the office and you can have the plate that reads Greenways, the actual thing. So he puts it on my Vista Cruiser, shakes hand, and let it begin. And then it was underutilized, it was buried, and it's right now all it's got is $10,000. But so we're going back because we made up a card to be included in the motor vehicle registrations and licenses. And the commissioner's most reason, well, we can't do that. So I go back, we already did. Here's what you did 10 years ago. So we got a little battle there. The idea of pathway is there. And occasionally I'll be in a traffic jam and I'll look up and there's a Greenway plate. We've got to squeeze more out of it than what we're currently getting. But it was a good trip. And now we have a card, a rack card, blah, blah. But we got to get into the request for, and now we just came up with the 5th edition of our regional map. And this is just Manchester. It's pretty much Hartford to Willimantic. And we're going into construction for the last gap in this 17-mile loop. And you've got 100 of these in flight. So yes, we've reached the tipping point, and it's a good thing we're young.
This is great, Bill.
Yeah.
Thanks for participating today. Sorry for the delay getting you onboarded.
No, I appreciate, I valued those minutes.
Thanks for tuning in to Roads Less Traveled with Craig Della Penna. I hope today's episode gave you fresh ideas and inspiration for exploring the unique world of real estate, rail trails, and bike tourism. Be sure to subscribe, like, and share the show so we can reach more trail lovers and real estate enthusiasts like you. Stay connected, stay curious, and I'll see you in 2 weeks with more expert insights and stories from the roads less traveled. Until then, keep exploring those hidden paths and uncovering new opportunities. Thanks.